Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to give you guys a quick update on my experience with the Sony CyberShot DSC-HX50V. Now this is the latest addition to the Mega Zoom point-and-shoot HX family, and as you can see it's got a 30 times optical zoom, which is a 35mm equivalent of 24 to 720 millimeters. It's not a very fast lens, but then again, no mega zoom lens really is. So you got to keep that in mind. This is not a low light camera, but it does outperform the 20V and 30V that it replaces. So definitely something to note right now, at least in my initial tests. This $450 latest HX model does outperform its predecessors, and that's important. I'm talking about both still and video capability, and in low light, which has been most of what I've been testing this camera with, believe it or not, because unfortunately the weather has not been great here since the launch of the camera. It's only been out a couple of days now. Priced at $450 retail, in case you missed my unboxing, which does make it right up there with the HX300, the most expensive CyberShot models, sitting beneath, of course, the RX twins, the RX1, which is a full-frame pocketable, I'll say pocket-friendly camera, and the RX100, which is, without question, yet another unmatched point-and-shoot camera. No other camera on the market like it, yielding digital SLR quality results out of a pocketable body. So this one, the HX50V, really does set some more new standards. This is the first camera to have a 30 times lens in its form factor, but more importantly, it really brings all of the features that I think most RX100 users, including myself, wish the RX100 had currently, and that's that it really accommodates enthusiasts not only in terms of adding manual controls like an EV compensation dial, as well as a traditional mode dial with everything that typical Sony CyberShot HX cameras have offered, but now you also have Sony's standardized multi-Hotshoe interface, which is going to give you a whole variety of different creative options to use with this camera, as well as other Sony cameras you may already have accessories for. So this is a standard Hotshoe that is being used across the board now, high-end, and even coming here into the CyberShot family in cameras like the HX50V. So very promising to have this. Also better ergonomics than you'll find on something like the RX100. So even though the 100 offers superior image quality because of its 1-inch sensor, no comparison there, it obviously lacks the 30 times zoom, but I really don't find them to be comparable. But again, focusing on what I was mentioning, when it comes to the actual ergonomics, the grip, here you've got a nice grip, and unfortunately the RX100 really offers nothing in the grip department. Just a polished, handsome camera, frankly, that really shines when it comes to its performance, but it isn't built around an enthusiast experience. This camera, on the other hand, surprisingly is. And that's surprising because it is based around a small sensor, something that most enthusiasts will shy away from. But I can tell you guys right now that it really does perform very, very well. Surprisingly well, in fact, better than the HX300 in my opinion. And I think a lot of that has to do with respecting the fact that as good as Sony's optical stabilization is, it really, when it comes to handheld use, tops out exactly where this camera tops out, at that 30 times end. And when you go beyond that, if you don't have any real true physical stabilization, things do become tricky. Now at $450, as I mentioned, this is an expensive camera. And if you're looking at something like the 20 or 30V, then you're clearly going to be questioning whether or not it's worth the premium. In my opinion, because it outperforms both of those models, which I did review extensively, go ahead and check it out in case you are really interested in picking up either of those cameras, because they are still very good pocket mega zooms with their 20 times lenses. This really does best them in every single form and fashion. The new control, the new lens, and especially the Hotshoe really do put it into another class of camera. As far as the balance of the actual performance when it comes to your images and video, as I mentioned, it's an improvement. Now, is it worth the premium? No, but I believe that the whole host of features when it comes down to the sum of the parts that we're looking at here with the HX50V, I think that that does justify the price difference. Of course, this camera will go down in price. We will see it eventually on sale one day. Of course, it just launched a few days ago, and that's why some retailers are actually taking advantage of the fact that it is sold out, and they're overpricing it, which in my opinion is just about the worst thing you can do in the industry. And I would stay away from retailers that are doing anything like that. But back to the point, if you're on the fence right now about this camera, find a retailer with a liberal return policy like Amazon. Best Buy has shortened their return policy. Whatever local store you have that you know is going to be willing to give you back a refund as long as you don't damage anything, including packaging, etc., and figure out whether or not you like it. I think you'll be very pleased. I don't think you'll be returning this camera. It's a perfect camera for travelers right now, even though this isn't the full review. If you're looking for an all-in-one package, whether you're an enthusiast or the average consumer looking to upgrade, I think you're going to be really pleased with the package that this camera has to offer. And you'll grow with it if you don't know how to use a lot of these controls, because Sony on camera explains many of them to you. Now, in terms of the actual zoom, I want to show you guys how quickly the camera boots up. First and foremost, about a second to shooting. Right there, you're ready to go. And even though we don't have a control ring here like the RX100, which I know some of you would love to see here, since this really does embody much of the controls and feel that I think the RX100, we're hoping the next version it's not going to have an identical body, but at least some sort of grip and all of these manual controls. There really aren't that many more, but enough to warrant some more clearly, and then most importantly that shoe. But when it comes to the zoom on here, even though we're missing that ring, we do actually have sensitivity now where we can go with a very slow zoom, as you're seeing, or full speed. Now, this may seem insignificant, but on previous generations, that simple finite control of the zoom was not there. And this difference is also something that can be found in the HX300 when you compare it to the HX200V. Even though both are very good cameras, the 300 benefits from a more precise zooming function. Now, this camera is made in China. It is predominantly a plastic and polycarbonate build, still weighty because of that 30 times lens. You do have really, in my opinion, one of the most flexible cameras out there, as long as you respect the fact that you're not going to get digital SLR results from it. And that's what cameras like the RX100 are for. However, that's if you're looking for a pocket camera, of course. However, this is really the culmination of the HX series. If you're a fan of the HX, if you owned anything from the HX5V, 9V, the 20 or 30V, then you know what the brand lives up to, especially if you're a fan of the cameras, which clearly I have been. I think Sony's kind of paved the way in this segment, and this camera really embodies everything. I mean, we're looking at, as I mentioned before, the HX200V's feature set has been improved upon and really crammed now into a pocketable form factor. And more controls, more features. Even if you never plan to buy something like the $450 electronic viewfinder, why wouldn't you want the capability? That's all I really have to say about it. Better to have the option than not. Sony isn't going to force you to buy any of those accessories. I think that for many of you, the external microphone that I'm in the process of reviewing is a perfect accessory for this camera, and at $150, that's a much more likely purchase for many of you who pick this up. The flash, unfortunately, does not articulate. That's something that I wish it did. That's something you'll find with the the RX100, but as you can see, no flexibility on the flash, so you can't bounce it around. That's unfortunate, but overall, I'm gonna give you guys more video samples from this camera as well, weather permitting, and overall, everything's been improved. So whether you're talking about indoor shooting, low light, even though this camera does not pack a fast lens that you can really shoot wide open like the RX100, which I hate to keep mentioning that, but I know many of you want to compare it, even though it's not a fair comparison. This doesn't have the Zeiss glass or the wide fast glass that the RX100 offers, but it does nonetheless outperform most cameras in its class indoors. and that's important. As for the color filters, things of that nature, I'll get into that in the full review, but those are even more gimmicky in my opinion than things like the Wi-Fi or GPS. The GPS function is simple, great for travel. This way you know where you took your shots. It will map it through play memories and really allow you to re-experience your trip as you go through your photos so that you know exactly where your shots came from. This isn't a new idea, new concept, but obviously a little bit more polished is what we can hope for, and that's what we see. The same goes for Wi-Fi. On the previous generation we had Wi-Fi, but we didn't have control. So now not only can you actually share your photos with any wireless device, whether it's a phone, tablet, computer, or television, but now you can use your iOS or Android smartphone or tablet even to control the camera, take shots in both video and still mode, and control the zoom, which is another thing I'll be demoing for you guys in the future. So a really wide variety of features here, and that's part of the reason I'm going to go ahead and recommend this to those of you on the fence trying to decide between this and the 20V, 30V, or obviously this camera. Granted, it may be about $150 more, but I think right now, if you're picking this up because you're going to be doing some summer traveling, you want everything in one body, this is going to accommodate it. Battery life is better also than either of those cameras, and it should be. It's a bigger camera, even though the battery is substantially, I shouldn't say substantially smaller, it's about the same size, a little bit smaller than what was found in the 20V and 30V, which was the same battery, the BP1, that was being used across the HX pocket-friendly line for a long time. So this is a newer battery, and as a result you're going to get some different performance, and that also has to do with the fact that the camera's been retooled in many ways. So this isn't just your standard upgrade in any form or fashion. Don't worry about the fact that we've been bumped up to 20 megapixels. It really has resulted in better results in my opinion. It's not a noisier experience even in low light. So no drawback on the fact that Sony's bumped it up, even though the sensor size has not increased. So that's important to point out. I've gotten used to the fact that we've got a new positioning on the power button. The shutter button is literally borrowed from the RX100, just a different color. And basically that's what's great about this camera. You've got, again, as I said earlier, an HX50V crammed into what I think most people would like to see the next version of an RX 100 look like. You know, a little bit more of grip incorporated, a little bit more of manual control, Hotshoe. This really is, in my opinion, it should be getting more attention, because this camera really does represent the best point-and-shoot pocket camera ever made, again, if you're not looking to get those digital SLR RX 100-like results. So with that said, really like this camera. This update was all about just giving you guys the ins and outs. One user wanted to know within video mode if you had full control. Unfortunately, you do not. That's part of the gap that Sony is still, in control of, to make sure that there's some kind of market segment for those higher end camcorders, because quite frankly, the video quality and image stabilization on this thing is just incredible, and it's understandable why they'd make sure that you couldn't use this as a full-blown handycam. Even though your video clips are limited to 29 minutes, that's about the structure of the business, not even Sony trying to prevent you from using this as a handycam. But this is definitely going to please a lot of you out there who do use the HX9V, 20V, 30V as dedicated video cameras, even more so than still imaging devices, because that's one of the best features of this generation, this family of cyber shot point and shoots. Beyond that, I'll save the rest for the full review. I know I've covered a lot today, but hopefully those of you who are really interested in this camera, I've answered a lot of your questions. And I think overall the value is here despite its high price, because there's really still nothing to compare this camera to currently. And even though this doesn't have the Zeiss name on it, Sony's G Glass really does perform exceptionally well here, and this is not the first time that I've said that, and that's because Sony has made sure, especially now with the way Sony has been I won't say restructuring the business, but their new approach, they're running a little bit leaner. That's why this thing isn't really in stock in mass numbers. It's sold out because they're taking orders. They're seeing, you know, what the market's like for it, and hopefully with time they do catch up, because I know this is going to be a very, very popular model, since it really does bring everything you could possibly want into the pocket, except for a large sensor. But that's really a compromise that maybe one day, folks. At least right now, that isn't in the cards. But hopefully, eventually, Sony does come up with that innovation and give us a camera like this with this sort of focal range, or maybe even more, maybe the HX300's range, reaching, you know, 1200 millimeters with an actual full-frame sensor. I mean, sky's the limit. But for right now, this is what's feasible. This is what they can sell at an affordable price. Or at least what's close to an affordable price. And I think that if you own something like the RX1, like myself, this makes a great pocket system to add a camera like this, especially if you already own the electronic viewfinder. Then you've this is a no-brainer. I mean, now you've got that focal reach you don't have with the RX1, even though you've got, you know, the best image quality in the business coming out of the RX1. And that's if you're only slanted towards having a pocket-friendly system. Clearly, there are a lot of other options in the NEX family that I cover thoroughly that give you great performance for the price with just a little more bulk. And even though, again, this is another example of a little more bulk, boy, does it go a long way. So we've got a faster, better performer, Wi-Fi control now, something you never had before, and overall just a really fantastic camera. In my full review, I will take you guys through pretty much everything you'll want to see in terms of menus. That'll be coming up very shortly, but I just wanted to give you this update because I know a lot of you are curious as to whether or not this is worth the upgrade, and I believe, without question, this is probably the best point-and-shoot camera that Sony has made, second to, of course, the RX Twins, which represent a completely different market. But it's just, again, part of Sony's new approach now of that leaner business is to make sure that they can't miss. And fortunately enough for us, I think that's yielded a better result than we've gotten in the past. And that's not to say that the cameras were bad. It's just a lot more money, or value for your money, excuse me, because a feature set like this, I think, was pretty much unimaginable for 20V or 30V owners, that the next upgrade would have features like this. And the fact that they're here is definitely a welcomed addition, in my opinion. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.